All right, everybody. Today I am with Adam Hall and came across his work a couple of weeks ago and fell in love with it and his style, and been doing a lot of stalking. I'm sorry, Adam, but I've done a lot of stalking, finding out as much as I could about you, and love your style. And I think the rest of the art tribe will also.
Well, first of all, thank you, man. I'm stoked for the invitation to come on here, and I have to shout out Bob Girardi as well, since he gave me a shout out. So, and I'm guessing that's how we kind of connected.
Exactly.
But creative influences, my sister was one growing up, and she kind of introduced me to like a lot of the painters like Van Gogh and Monet and Rembrandt and stuff like that. And so that was kind of I would say probably my teen years is when I really started to kind of research some of the classical painters and the Renaissance era painters, all that. And then it just slowly became more like living artists. Like Gerhard Richter was a huge influence. Lots of books and lots of heckling other artists to please share with me all of their knowledge. I didn't go to university or college for art. I guess growing up with a very blue collar father, there was always this part of me that I just didn't have access to any artists or understanding that was something that you could make a living doing. And so my next natural path, or I guess sort of the contours of my artistic path, was music. And so I thought, well, that's something that I love, that's creative. So maybe, and that kind of made sense of something I could make money at in regards to like the music business side of things. So that I ended up going to university to study music business. And so I was painting in my dorm room all this time, but it was always just like this hobby, like most people that aren't studying art. And so I got a job out of college working as a tour manager, and I had a recording studio job. And then eventually, through pursuing art on the side all the time, I eventually got really good at doing graphic design. So when I was on the road with these bands, I was like, hey, your merch sucks. I think I can design that shirt better. And so I started designing merch. And then that was my way of getting off the road, because I got really burnt out. And I met my wife, who was like, are you going to be touring all the time? And so I was like, yeah, I kind of need an exit strategy here. So my exit strategy was doing graphic design. And that was kind of my first real job that I considered like an artistic job, where I was designing on my computer 8 hours a day for people like Blake Shelton, all these big name country artists. And then I just got so burnt out with that. And eventually got to a point where the side hustle of oil painting kind of leveled up to what I was doing with my day job. And so I've been doing it full time now for like right around 5 years. So you can kind of see it in the background. There's one right there that is of my son, and he is in his astronaut helmet with his superhero cape on. And I've caught him, like as a father, I'm always like, it's almost like a songwriter, how you're always kind of open, you're listening for like song ideas. That's kind of how I've been with my kids lately, where like I'm always like seeing him do something. I'm like, oh, that's a cool painting idea. So I'm always trying to capture it on my phone real quick. And so I caught him in my backyard running around with that astronaut helmet on and that cape. And then I, in Photoshop, superimposed, like putting an ocean in front of him. And as part of I guess I can do my plug now. I have a solo show coming up at Robert Lang Studios the first Friday of August. But anyway, that painting of Leo as an astronaut is probably my favorite to date. And then there's two paintings that I did, one called Red Bear and the other called Yellow Fox. And that was like my first two, like I would say like successes of adding a figure into my work. with mostly just being a landscape or seascape painter. I was kind of exploring this idea of kind of bridging the gap even further with trying to connect with the viewer and adding in this like anonymous figure. And that was the original idea. And then I had the idea of like, well, I'm really struggling right now as a father I'm having like anxiety of sort of loosening the grip of my parental roles and like letting my kids go out into the wilderness of life and experience the failures and all the things that come along with it and not hovering over them. So I had this idea of kind of doing a painting that represented both of them, and above each of my kids' beds since the time they were little was a bear and a fox. And so the red raincoat, which is red bear, kind of similar to what I'm working on behind me, represented my son, Leo. And then the other one was yellow fox, which is a yellow raincoat. And they were both kind of entering into a forest. You know, when I first started taking art serious enough to where I was going to use it as like a side hustle to try to pursue it as a passion, but also as like a way of extra income. It was at the same time that I figured out that I love painting landscapes, that I'm going to be a landscape painter. And so I just naturally was drawn to the idea of trying to capture sort of the reverence of a place, or the kind of full spectrum of emotions like a person can feel when they're standing in front of like this intense landscape. And so that kind of naturally just evolved into a point where I knew I was going to start wanting to explore the idea of painting the ocean, because I felt like, if anything, the ocean has that reverence to it, has that like way of evoking emotion out of someone. Like almost everybody can relate in some way to the ocean. And so after many failed attempts at painting the ocean, having my first like few successful ones go out to the galleries, and I saw that the connection that they had was so much more deeper to the viewer than the other stuff I was doing. And it kind of clicked like, oh, this is something I really want to keep exploring. I want to balance the chaos and the beauty. And what better way than painting the ocean? Because there's chaos and there's beauty and there's calm and there's all these things. And then aside from that, it's just very fun to paint. It's like you get into this like a flow state. It's very meditative. Pursuing the arts, whether it's music or whatever, like your highs are high and your lows are so low, man. And it's like there's a spectrum that you're constantly going on. And it's like all these little wins along the way, like kind of keep you going. And it's like with the actual artistic process, it's kind of the same thing. It's like I'll come into the studio sometimes and look around at all these unfinished paintings, and I'm just like, you know, with having a show coming up too, it's like there's a lot of pressure of like, I have all these paintings I've started. Like if these things don't turn out, and I'm spending all this time investing into these paintings, if this doesn't turn out, like this is not going to be good. And so there's a lot of stress kind of involved with that. But I've definitely over the years learned how to manage that better. But yeah, I definitely have paintings in here right now that I am not happy with, and I get super frustrated. And so I tend to just kind of put them aside, work on the things I'm happy with right now. And eventually it'll turn out. And I just keep, telling myself like, it always turns out. There's always a few paintings here and there. And I'm sure you've experienced this too, where it's like a lot of the times the paintings in a show that I am the most insecure about end up becoming the painting that sells first. So I tend to try to remember that too, that a lot of times I'm just in my own head, and to try to step out of that.
Well, I've taken enough of your time. I really appreciate you taking time to talk with us. And
oh man, it's been great. Thank you.
And we will keep an eye on your work, and good luck on your show.